Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Anchor Watch. I'm your host, Bobby Jones. And I feel like a broken record. A lot of things keep happening in the week between episodes. So let's get right into it. Open and salvo. What we're going to go over today will be the recent trip that Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, took over to Asia and the comments he made there and the fallout from it. Then we're also going to talk about something more domestic that deals with the United States military, something that's kind of close to my heart, and that is military housing and what the Trump administration recently did to show where they really stood on taking care of the troops, as they like to say. So let's start with the anchor point. The anchor point today is Hegseth. Pete Hegseth went to a conference, basically the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue over in Asia. And he said something to me that I had to do a double take and kind of blinked a couple of times, and then I had to hear it again. Basically, I don't know if you've seen the clip, link to it in my Substack, but he talked about how China is the imminent threat, intimate threat, imminent threat. So he used the wrong word to describe what the heck was going on to start off. But then on top of that, he basically said to China that, hey, you're a threat that's going to happen. And he said this in a forum where ASEAN was meeting. So for those who don't know, the Association of Southeast Asian Countries, nations rather, ASEAN is a group that goes all the way back to 1967. And it's got 10 members with an 11th pending in Timor-Leste that was created to create stability in the South China Sea region. So you got Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand, countries that have done a fantastic job of creating an active dialogue to try to solve their problems. Now they're sandwiched in between China, which is the big, big power in the geopolitical area. You also have Australia, but you also have the United States and the United Kingdom that has worked very heavily with those nations, economically and diplomatically. And so, what you need to understand about this unique setup that they have is dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. Diplomacy, diplomacy, diplomacy is how they go about doing business. Well, in comes the stereotypical American who sits there and saber rattles and says, you need to be ready for China, and the United States is going to be ready to back you. If you remember Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing, Senator Tammy Duckworth asked him about ASEAN specifically. She asked, what is it? Can you name any of the countries in it? He had no clue, no idea what the group was. He mentioned that he knew about South Korea and Japan and Australia, three countries who were nowhere near involved with that group. But most importantly, he didn't understand how the South China Sea and the geopolitical picture with economic exclusion zones and man made islands by China has kind of changed things in the area. Now, I want to focus on this because two reasons. One, I personally know all about that area because half my career was spent in Japan, going to the South China Sea and dealing with this area of the world. It's sensitive. There's freedom of navigation, freedom to fish, all these things that are there. And China, over the course of the last 2 decades, has increased its navy and its power to try to dominate the region economically. There's a lot of natural resources, a lot of fisheries, a lot of things that are at play. However, the ASEAN countries have been able to so far deal in a give and take with China, where there has been no escalation to where there's no war, right? They've done a good job of dealing with Australia. They've done a good job of dealing with the United Kingdom and the United States, where all out war has not broken out. And that has been because of their diplomatic efforts. And here we have someone who comes in and basically takes a chair like it's a wrestling match and slam it in the middle of the meeting. Now, it puts these countries in a very, very unique position because they don't want to publicly go against the United States. They don't want to publicly go against China. They don't want to publicly go against Australia. But you took their diplomatic maneuvering out of their hands by declaring something on their soil, right? Now, Why do I bring this up? Not just the fact that Hegseth knows nothing about that geopolitical space. He doesn't know much about many of them. But if you've noticed, Hegseth has gone abroad a lot to the point where I wonder, is he becoming the de facto Secretary of State? Let's ask ourselves a question. Marco Rubio's Secretary of State, right? How many people, how many times have you seen him travel abroad and say things overseas? That's the job of the Secretary of the State. It's like any other country's foreign minister. They're supposed to be the mouthpiece on these policies. Secretary of Defense is supposed to speak specifically and directly to defense issues, whether it's abroad or domestic, right? But the classifications of countries being this, that, and the other typically do not fall on the SecDef. It falls on Sec State. But because Marco Rubio has been tagged by President Trump to be the Secretary of State, now the acting national security advisor, the head archivist of the United States, and the de facto head now of USAID, our number one soft power arm that we had in the United States, he's supposed to be in charge of all four. So if he's in charge of all four of these different organizations, how much effort is he spending on his primary job? It's debatable. Meanwhile, Hegseth, because of the various scandals and these things, they have sent him abroad to try to reestablish his credibility, but he's becoming the de facto Secretary of State. I don't know if that's a good thing because out of everybody in President Trump's cabinet, he knows the least amount of international issues. Let's just be real. He's demonstrated that. He continues to show that. And by going over to Asia and just basically throwing a flaming bag of crap into the middle of a damn diplomatic discussion, he now has countries having to reshape how they message others just because. Just because. The other piece that I want to make sure I emphasize here is China and its development of naval power over the last 30 years has been extraordinary. Extraordinary. So, if we even go into the military sphere that is supposed to be Hegseth's subject matter expertise, it's not. I have more experience dealing with this than he will ever have. But the nations that he's talking to would have to work in conjunction with the United States, right? It's not, hey, we'll back you, or hey, the United States does this solo. If conflict happens there, it's going to have to be a coordinated effort amongst many nations. And when you don't know the alliances, if you don't know the relationships, if you don't know the capabilities and the strategic goal of a conflict in that area, then you shouldn't be commenting on it. He simply wanted to focus on Taiwan, this, that, and the other. That's only one phase of if conflict breaks out in the South China Sea. And the South China Sea has the type of background, the type of kindling spark the World War III. It really does. It really, really does. So we have to send our best, our brightest, our most politically sensitive to that area to have these discussions. It's that simple. Um, moving on to below the waterline. So that made international news, right? Now let's transition to more domestic issues. The military.com made a report, and it's been picked up by others, that the big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump loves to tout, the amount of money that's been designated to do certain things, there's one particular thing in it that really, really, kind of chaps my hide here. $1 billion with a B was designated to go to Army housing, military housing, Army housing in particular, to help fix a lot of the issues that a lot of our servicemen and women's families are dealing with while living on base. We're talking things from mold, we're talking things to lead and water that have historically been documented. Well, over the past couple of years, they have passed funding to help try to change that, to improve that, as they should. Well, $1 billion that have been designated to do exactly that has since been pushed. It's been pushed to support sending active duty service members to the border to do border security and border enforcement. Now, never mind the fact that we have ICE, never mind the fact that you have Custom Borders Patrol, never mind that you have all these different entities whose jobs are solely to deal with immigration and border security. The fact that we're sending active duty personnel there takes them away from what their primary Title IX mandated jobs are supposed to be. I'm sorry, Title 10 jobs are supposed to be, right? And that is the mission of the United States Army, etc., right? And it's not a domestic thing. Why this is happening? This is happening because Trump needs to have the visual of overwhelming strength and, if need be, cruelty. Because in the Trump administration, just like Hegseth making the speech that he made over in Asia, appearances in their mind is winning the war. Not capability, not specialty, not people doing the jobs that they have been mandated to do. No, it's about looking as tough as possible. That's what matters. And so now we're taking how many troops, another 9 to 10,000, away from their primary jobs to go sit on the border, right? But now it's costing those people. The Biden administration and the Obama administration in particular, and the Bush administration, let me make sure I'm very clear on this, had a theory, a working theory that military readiness is not just buying weapons and ships and planes. It is making sure that the service member and their families are taken care of, because they realize a service member who knows their family is taken care of back home, when they go down range, are more effective at their job. It's that simple. It's human resources 101 in a lot of respects, but each one of those previous presidents had passed some type of legislation to make life easier for the families, right? I mean, Obama famously, was able to transfer the GI Bill dependence of service members, where their kids won't have to necessarily pay for college, etc. Great things. But when you look at where people live, that's where it starts. And does your family live in safe, healthy housing? And for any dime to be taken away from a service member's family to stay in relative peace and quiet and safety while you're going on deployment, all for basically a glorified photo op, is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so when it goes to, well, Trump cares about the troops. Does he? He's not taking care of their families. He's going to let them live in borderline squalor conditions, unhealthy conditions, lead in water, mold in the air. I mean, how, if you are a sergeant or a chief petty officer or anybody that's going on deployment, knowing that your family lives in that type of environment, how can you feel confident about what's happening while you're gone? Or God forbid if something happens to you. The message of taking care of troops, the message of caring about our troops, is not something that's about the speeches. It's about the actions. Show me your time, show me your money, show me your resources. And from those things, I can show you your priorities. And right now, we have a proposed budget that is increasing the amount of money that we spend on weapons, but decreasing the money that we spend on the people who will have to use them in the military. Because Trump does not fundamentally understand that service members are the weapon, not the weapons themselves. Hold on, Sarah Bonnet. If a service member is slightly distracted, the mission can go to crap. Absolutely, and this is not a if then. This has actually happened. Me being in Navy, we've had kids, people on deployment that we're in the third, fourth month, and they mentally unravel because they know things at home aren't settled. Right. So you, as a commanding officer of your unit, whether it's your ship, your battalion, whatever, you do everything you can to make sure everything is good to go before you leave. You have family readiness groups that exist in each one of these units to make sure while you're gone, they're able to maintain and see what's going on. And if there's a crisis, they're supposed to go and help reach out and get it fixed. Right. But there's only so much you can do when you know that your home is not up to code. And then you got to go anyway. So imagine this. Imagine you are, like I said, a sergeant, and you have been told to deploy to the southern border. You leave your home that has broken this, broken that, no running water, or no hot water rather, or water that's contaminated by fuel, whatever, because these are things that have happened. Look them up. and you're sitting on the board of doing something you weren't even trained to do in the first place, knowing that the money that sent you there could have been used to fix your house. It's that simple. I'm not trying to be, a negative Nancy on this, or I'm just giving you the reality of the appearances. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, you're about to spend 50 to 90 million dollars on a parade in Washington D.C. that you're going to force same said service members to go participate in, because your ego demands that you have a huge parade for your birthday, not the Army's birthday. Because if it was up to the Army, they'd all be sitting at home. You know what? You know what? If it was up to the Army, I'm not a soldier. I was a sailor, but this is pretty similar. If it was up to the Army or the Navy or whatever branch of service, we'd all just be sitting around having a nice cookout to celebrate the Army's birthday. You'd have a ceremony, and the rest of the day would be a cookout. There'd be no marching. There'd be no getting into your dress alpha uniforms, dress blue uniforms, and having to go march in front of a guy that dodged a draft 5 times. I guarantee you that's what we'd rather do. But here we are. So the two things that I just talked about here, they uniquely are linked to defense, but it shows that there is almost a cinematography type Hollywood movie script mindset when it comes to looking at national defense. It's about looking good, sounding tough, right? And portraying that instead of actually being with the troops, understanding what their needs are, and training them and equipping them the best. It's just about, I have a big gun and I look tough in this uniform, and you see me everywhere. And I'll be able to talk tough in an international environment and have people, respect me just because I show up and I'm the big bad American. Never mind, I don't know what countries are in this organization. Never mind that I don't know anything about the history of the local area, etc. These are the things that are happening across government because we don't have subject matter experts leading. We have loyalists. From the FBI to the CIA to the Department of Defense to the Department of State, we have people who are not serious, number one, and number two, who don't know what the hell they're doing. And the ripple effect, the butterfly effect of having Trump in office doing this is going to take us years to recover from. And there are members of Congress on both sides now who are starting to figure that out, that are starting to actually speak up. I think a lot of them knew, but they're starting to speak up publicly. The town halls that you're seeing, all of this is now coming into a place where we're getting to a road of demarcation here. We are going to have to go one way or the other. And this is going to drive towards the midterms and beyond. Is this the new American normal, or will this be looked at as a historical aberration? Okay, with all that being said, I wanted to leave some time here for some questions. So let's see what we have here. Let's see, Tracy Mack. Well, I think the beautiful thing about how we are set up in the Department of Defense is there are many layers between that strategic violation of the Constitution that we all fear that Trump will do, and then the lower level tactical area where, okay, you're shooting, you're trying to do this, you're taking action. Again, I've said it again, officers who are in command of these units take a different oath. They do not, in their oath, there is no mention of obeying the president of the United States. That's only for the enlisted. And there's a reason. I say it all the time. That is the safety check. We take 2 different oaths. Now, that being said, right now, the only resistance that you see to some of these constitutional crisis items has been the judiciary. So when you look at the Constitution, just refresh everybody's memory, you have Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. Article 1 covers Congress and the legislative body. Article 2, the president, the chief executive body. And then Article 3, the judiciary, right, and the Supreme Court. There's a reason that the founders put it in that order. Number 1 is Congress. They have been absent at the wheel of doing their job and oversight. From the emoluments cause and the Trump administration, the Trump family doubling their worth in 6 months, to checking and making sure that money designated and passed by Congress as a budget goes to where it's supposed to. That includes grants at universities, all of that. Congress has been completely absent of doing its duty, right? Article 2, the chief executive president is doing whatever the hell he wants to, and the only one that's functioning as a check to that is the judiciary, which unbelievably has more Trump appointees than anything else right now. And yes, PJ, you're absolutely right. The Jags were fired immediately upon entering office. So for those who don't know, judge advocate generals, or the Jags, are the military lawyers in the Department of Defense. They are uniformed military members that have gone to law school and are practicing attorneys on behalf of the Department of Defense. Now, yes, they do the things like prosecute crimes and stuff that happens in DOD, but most importantly, they're the ones that interpret the rules of engagement that military members fight under. So when I was in command in the Middle East, I had a JAG tell me, this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do. Constraints versus restraints. But these are the ones that will sit there and say that is unconstitutional. And they fired the leaders of each branch of service has one, right? They fired them immediately upon coming into office. Why? Because they want to replace them with yes men. Because Jags know, hey, you cannot take your weapons and your unit and go down the street, Fifth Avenue in New York, shooting at American citizens. It's illegal. That takes an extremely unique circumstance. But when you have a JAG that'll be like, no, that's fine. And they will expect the commanding officer of that unit to do it. That's the fail-safe that they removed. And that should terrify everybody. They did that, and then they removed all the inspectors general that we had both in the Department of Defense and other government organizations. So when malfeasance happens, the investigations will also go awry as well. That is not by coincidence. They don't want any accountability, and they want a yes man to allow these things to happen. And then there have been multiple reports of violating the Records Act. So everything that these guys are supposed to do is supposed to be on record. I don't care if it's classified or not. There are systems and mechanisms to record their actions, their discussions, their thought processes. But when you have Pete Hegseth on Signal, which is not an approved government recording apparatus, you're skirting around all of that. And that also is by design. Let's see, sir, about the service members are watching, they may not want to re-enlist for fear of being able. So, Sarah, that is a very valid point about service members watching and not wanting to re-enlist. I've personally gotten texts and phone calls from people I've served with who most of them are old enough they can retire. They're like, I'm out. And that subject matter expertise walks out because they feel like, A, the current administration in the active duty force is not competent. And then B, they're seeing the cuts that are happening to the VA, the 6,000 originally fired, and now the up to 80,000 they're going to remove, services and those things that are being reduced and taken apart. These things have a ripple effect, not just for retention, but also recruiting. How is it you're going to tell an 18-year-old, please come join this military? And I know they're saying, hey, recruiting numbers are up. No. The recruiting numbers started going up under Biden last year this time. And that's because they have different programs to get kids in shape, to help them take the test to get in. All these things, the ASVAB, all these things happen under Biden. And it's been a steady crest up because of it. Now that you have the president and Secretary Hegseth in, let's come back next year and see what those numbers look like. As someone who did recruiting for the military, you're going to see that number come right back down. Because when you go out of your way to erase military history, when you go out of your way to kick out people who want to serve just because you don't agree or value their value as a person or their lifestyle, but yet they're willing to go when most people won't, it sends a message. It sends a message where, okay, a guy that you've worked with your entire, tour, all of a sudden has to pack up and just go, get kicked out. They got 30 days to pack up their shit and go. These are the type of things that are happening, and it's eroding trust and confidence when you come in and fire the only black guy on the chairman of on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the only woman on the Joint Chiefs of Staff just because they're a woman and they're black. You don't think people are noticing that? You don't think there's a ripple effect of that, of making a decision, do I want to join this organization or not? They're trying to make the military a niche organization when in actuality, it's America's original DEI organization. right? There were blacks, there were cross-dressers that served the revolution. Hell, the standards and practices that the army uses to this day were put in code by a gay man that was kicked out of the Prussian army and Baron von Steuben. I mean, look all of this stuff up. It wasn't because they were like, yeah, we're welcoming all. America had no choice when they were fighting the revolution. So they took all comers that were willing to fight. And now we're just pissing on that 250 years later because we have some guy that thinks a John Wayne movie or whenever he watched it is how America actually operates in the military because he did not have the testicular fortitude himself to go serve after being called 5 times. Let's see. What else? What can we do about all this? Feels hopeless. It is not hopeless. It is not hopeless. Number one, I tell anybody who will listen, get involved with your local government. And by involved, I mean go to the meetings. And I also mean run for local office. The three groups that have more of an influence on your life than any other are school boards, county commissions, city councils, and then anything that branches off of that, any committee, blah, blah, blah. A lot of these committees that actually help your local lifestyle, it's not even elected. You just get appointed. You just say, I want to do it. But run there. Why do I say that? Because they have a hand on what your community does and what it values. And the state also has that as well. Now, that being said, people focus on national elections. But when you think about it, the gerrymandered districts were not created by Washington, D.C., they were created in state houses. When you think about it, what you get taxed at the local level, right, that you readily pay on a regular basis happens at the local level. So, number one, get involved with local government. Number two, have the hard conversations with your friends. We're now reaching a point where people are starting to listen. You know, people talk about the MAGA cult, blah, blah. Well, when they see their taxes happening, when they see their benefits being eroded like it's happened, especially in rural areas where those grants for farmland and all these type of things have started to happen, they're pissed. They're frustrated. I mean, you see the town halls in Republican red districts. They are not pretty. Joni Ernst looked like a complete jackass this past week, right? And in typical arrogant fashion, she has maintained and continued to act the same way. Okay, now's the time to talk to her constituents and be like, hey, you know what else she's done? You know what else she's backed? You know what else she's voted for? You've got to start having these conversations because what's going to happen is people are going to just become staid and bitter. And without proactive pushback, this will become the new norm, right? And we've got to do something about that. Let's see. Yeah, I'm on Substack. Please subscribe. I got some videos that I post through the week on different subjects. And I definitely love to engage. So when people write me, I write them back. The good thing about being a retired guy, you have a little bit of time on your hands to go down rabbit holes. But yeah, so next week we're going to talk about this military parade / charade / I don't even know what to even quantify this thing as. It's unprecedented. You can count the times the United States of America has had military parades. I mean, I want to say the last one in my lifetime, Desert Storm in '91 when Schwarzkopf and everybody came back home from, that quick war. But I mean, there wasn't a parade from when I came home from the global war on terrorism, and that's the longest war in American history. There wasn't a parade for those that came back from Vietnam. As a matter of fact, it was the opposite. It was protest. So, World War II, maybe. So I don't know why Donald Trump, and here's the other thing too. If you don't know, the parade in DC, they have a whole VIP setup where if you donate a certain amount of money, you get access to the president, you get access to this, you get access to that, you get better seats, etc. It's a scam. It's a scam. Let's see. Attending a march, worried about being bullied by law enforcement. So, Meg, I understand that. The beautiful thing about today is we all have phones that have recording. Record everything and abide by what they say. Go out of your way to be peaceful. Now, there are always going to be people who try to antagonize. If they're with you, calm them down. If they're not with you, move away. But record everything. Criminal liability is still a thing. Civil rights are still a thing. And let me tell you this, Meg, It's hard standing up to these type of people right now, but 11-year-old black girls did it in Alabama in the 60s in their Sunday best. We can stand up to this too. Generation has that moment where they've said they've had enough and they've got to stand up. You are the people, not them. And that's what makes America great. All right, people, that's right at 30 minutes. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll be posting throughout the week, and definitely hope to see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.